You have an idea. You want to tell it to the world, but you don't know where to start. That's where Anchor comes in. They have the tools for you to edit, produce, and record your idea right from your phone or computer. It's the easiest way to reach and grow your audience. They publish for you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major platforms. And to top it all off, they match you with advertisers so you can earn from your passion and your wonderful idea. So tell me, what are you waiting for? Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and follow your dream. Welcome to Disruptive Adventism. My name is Jose Briones, and I'll be your host for this podcast. This podcast is about discussing the polemical statements and practices that are part of the Adventist fabric, which in turn shape this belief system to be unique and relevant for today's society. Our conversation today goes over the important topic of forgiveness. We hope you're able to enjoy it, and with nothing else to say, let us begin. It is time for another episode of Disruptive Adventism, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today, our topic is very important. We're going to be speaking about forgiveness, and we have Garrison Hayes himself with us. How's it going, Garrison?
It's going well, man. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, thanks a bunch for taking the time to record. So before we get too deep into this topic, this very important topic, tell us, what are you doing? Where you're from? Give us a little bit of background, and how's life?
Okay, well, like you said, my name is Garrison Hayes, and I am from Atlanta, Georgia originally, but I've been all over the place probably over the last, 9 years now, from Collegedale, to Michigan, Collegedale, Tennessee, to Berrien Springs, Michigan. Now I'm out here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, specifically in Alexandria, Virginia. Where I am the associate pastor. My title is Pastor for Generational Ministries at the Community Praise Church in Alexandria, Virginia. And we are an Adventist church. And I'm enjoying it. I've only been doing it for the last 4.5 months. So I'm a baby pastor at this point.
Cool.
Yeah.
You enjoying it though?
I'm enjoying it. Meeting a lot of new people. Learning a lot of new names. Every week it seems like I meet somebody new and they're like, no, we met 2 weeks ago at the door. I was shaking your hand, Pastor. You don't remember me? And I'm like, oh,
forgive me.
That's right. With the other 1,000 people.
Yeah. It's a big church, huh?
It is a big church. So we have 2 services. We have about 1,100 members. And, it is a lot of people and a lot of names. The senior pastor is Bron Jacobs. So shout out to Bron. And doing some good ministry. So I'm enjoying it and learning a lot.
Cool. Well, I'm pretty sure you get to deal with this topic that we're going to talk about more often than, our regular listener. But nonetheless, everyone needs to listen, needs to understand. So let's get into it. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the topic. So let's start defining it. So in your view, what's forgiveness?
So forgiveness, according to Google, is the action or process of forgiving or being forgiven, right? It's the idea of pardoning a person. I don't think that forgiveness necessarily means forgetting. Okay. Especially in human relationships. I don't think forgiveness necessarily in a human relationship means that everything goes back to the way that it once was, right? I think that's one of the kind of misconceptions in the way that we view forgiveness. So personally, I see forgiveness as finding a way to resolve the tensions between 2 people and making an informed decision on where to go with that relationship from that point forward,
So I hear you say that when it comes to forgiveness, you may have an issue, you may have a tension, but at some point in time, maybe that tension will never go away, or it will just reshape your relationship.
Well, I would like to think that the tension does go away. I like to think that, you and I, we have an issue. I forgive you. No more tension. Now, since there's no more tension, now we get to have the privilege of defining our relationship moving forward. And maybe it will be best for us not to. And the reason why I kind of add that element of, I guess, caveat or that kind of, I get specific there is because in going through some of this forgiveness, working through forgiveness with others, and helping to mediate some conversations on forgiveness and reconciliation, I've learned that it's actually not healthy for some relationships to continue, right? There are times where I've been in conversation with two people who are working to forgive each other, and the best thing for those two people are to work through their issues. Everything is fine. We've squashed it. We've moved on, but we've also moved on from the relationship. And I think that's okay. I think I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I think some people kind of get it stuck in their minds that when you forgive someone, it means we have to come into a relationship and we have to be close and all of that. But life is a little bit more complicated than that. And, just on the outset, I want to make sure that people know that that's the ideal. The ideal is that you guys will come back together after forgiveness is taking place and your relationship is 100% whole and beautiful and moving forward. But the reality is that sometimes that relationship can't continue. And that's okay as long as there's no hard feelings or animosity being held in either party's heart.
So walk me through this idea or this process that you're speaking about. How does it work? How does forgiveness work, or how have you seen it work?
So I think there are a lot of ways it could work. But to talk a little bit about kind of the project that I've been working with and working on, and I guess that I started. What we really want to accomplish is bringing people together to work through their issues, to find some level of reconciliation, and to establish the terms of their relationship moving forward, to make it very clear, like, this is what we're striving for and what we're trying to accomplish. So what that means for us is that we will get two people together in a room to essentially ask a few questions. What happened? Why did it happen? And where do we go from here? And by working through those questions, no, they're not exhaustive. There are other things that people talk about, but those three kind of places of kind of those checkpoints, what happened? Why did it happen? And where do we go from here? Kind of serves as a really good foundation for meaningful dialogue between two estranged parties. And I think it's incredibly important for us to go through that process with those who have harmed us or those whom we've harmed, just to free ourselves of the baggage. Like, man, I think I learned this, and tell me when you want to get in here, but I think I learned this the hard way, having carried around so much bitterness towards individuals who I felt harmed by. The day I decided, you know what, I'm going to actually reach out to my mom, who my parents go through this really messy split and divorce. No, I'm going to reach out to my mom and actually have this conversation. And I've been harboring this thing against her for whatever reason. And I'm learning that it actually does more harm to me than it's doing to her. Like, it's definitely hurting our relationship, but it's hurting every girl I've dated. It's hurting all of my friendships. There's this part of me that's just inaccessible. It's hurting my relationship with God. I think forgiveness is so important, and it's so important that we work through our issues, because we don't even understand how the ramifications of that ill will, of those negative feelings that's inside of us. So it's kind of a long answer, but I think that's, a part of the process is really trying to get to this place of freedom ultimately.
So I hear the whole, what happened? And how do we go? Where do we go from there? What was the middle?
Why?
Yeah. So what happened? Why it happened? And where do we go? Very, very good questions. I think when I'm listening to you, especially, I resonate with the example that you gave with the mother. I used to have a lot of issues with my mother, especially when I came to the United States. My parents are divorced, and I said mean things to my mother. I said things that I regret now, but I have worked them through. And I think there's this idea of projection. When you're having an issue with somebody and you're not dealing with that issue, you start projecting the same issue into other people. And you kind of start distrusting them because it's like, what if this person acts like that other person? Because you still haven't resolved that. There's this tension that you need to liberate. And I resonate with that because I went through that similar process with my mother where I sat down with her and I asked, what can I do? I've said very hurtful things. And yeah, I recognize that it was my fault in this case, and I try to reconcile. When it comes to this idea of forgiveness, who goes to reach out for forgiveness first?
Yeah. I think, the biblical mandate is that the person whose mind it comes to first, right? Man, you're going to have to help me out on it. Is this Matthew 5, I want to say, where or is it 6? It might be 6.
It's in the Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon on the Mount. If you are bringing your gift to the altar and it comes to your mind that your brother or your sister or this person has a problem with you, right? Jesus is saying, you leave your gift and you go. I think that is probably the place where so many people get hung up, right? Like the simple fact that I am called to go Jesus places a really high bar there. If they have a problem with you, it's not even like I'm called to go if I have a problem with someone, right? It's not like I'm called to go if I remember, oh man, I really don't like Jose, right? Like I gotta go to him. No, if I remember or I recall or it comes to my mind that Jose has a problem with me, like I'm called to go. So I use that as kind of the principle behind who reaches out to who first. There's really no set in stone, the offended party must, or the offending party must. No, that's really not. Jesus doesn't even go there. He doesn't give anyone the moral high ground to posture and to stand back like I'm waiting for you to come and apologize. Nope. He says, whoever, if it comes to your mind, you remember. So that's mine.
So starting from that perspective, whoever thinks about it first goes. It's really hard for that to happen though. I mean, I've been in situations where I think about it, but it's like, man, this is going to be a very awkward conversation. This is probably not going to go well. And what are some of the things that we can do to prepare ourselves in order to go there? Because there may be minimal offenses to a certain degree. There's things that are quote unquote what we will call petty. You got offended for something that was petty, but you can go and repair that relationship, mend it, and it's not where you're going to end up splitting. It was just like, you know what, I really didn't like what you said, but I can live with that if we can work it through. Whereas you have other offenses that are of a grander degree. Maybe you have an offense with something that you harmed somebody else physically or mentally, or maybe even spiritually. And what if that person doesn't remember, or how do we prepare to go to that place? If I remember, if one of our listeners is recalling maybe that someone else is having an offense against them or someone else has a problem with them, how do we prepare to go and forgive the other person?
And that's a wonderful question. It really is probably the biggest hurdle, I think that it is. I don't want to even, normally you feel like, oh man, this is cliche. But it's actually the only option we have in this situation. Like as frequently as it might be said, the only option you have is to ask for God to empower you to do it, right? To ask for the courage that it takes to actually reach out to someone, to go after that. So that's where that's the place of starting. I can say for me, going back to the situation with my mom, I think that God often he's patient with us. He's very patient with us, and he's growing us. He moves us along in a way to get us to where he's wanting us to be. And I knew, not too long after I started college that my strained relationship with my mother was negatively affecting me, right? I knew that, and I knew that I needed to go and to just start this process, but pride, fear, discouragement, trying to talk about something else and it didn't go well. So maybe this is just, I'm just going to not do this at all. I'm just going to hold back and avoid having this conversation. Well, what I found is that God continually showed me time and time again how avoiding this conversation was hurting me and how it was like playing out negatively in my life. So what I would, encourage for anyone who's like, man, I know that there's someone that I need to go work through. I'd probably encourage you to just journey with God on this. And as God gives you confidence and courage to start the conversation, to work through those issues. Yeah, I think you should just go with God on it. I mean, really commit yourself to going as he leads. And maybe, you'll kind of realize that maybe it's not hurting you as much. Maybe you're fine, but consider that it might be hurting someone else. And it might be preventing them from growing and from getting to a place where they need to be both spiritually and professionally and just socially in their life. And consider yourself going on a mission. Consider it a mission trip that takes courage and takes commitment, for God. I think as Adventists, I think this is an Adventist podcast, so I can say as Adventists, I think we should really prioritize forgiveness and reconciliation a lot more. The Old Testament ends, at least in our Bibles, it ends with Malachi talking about an Elijah to come and how that Elijah will prepare the way. So we understand that to be John the Baptist in the New Testament time. But in some ways, we believe that to be a part of our mission as Adventists, to be ones who are preparing the way for Christ's coming. And it says very clearly that the work of that Elijah is to turn the hearts of the fathers to the sons and the sons to the fathers. There really is this work of reconciliation embedded in what this Elijah to come does. And we saw that in John the Baptist by calling for repentance, right? But I do believe that there is an interpersonal aspect to it. And I think that we should take that a little bit more seriously as we kind of take our mission, as we talk about mission all the time and really kind of get into it.
Yeah, that's part of as we were talking right before we were engaging, the multifaceted mission. It's not only the doctrinal side, but it's the social component, the personal development that you have. And I think that I agree with you when it comes to this work. We need to do a little bit more of work because not only are offenses coming among churches or among members, but even to the world at large, reconciling. I mean, that's the work of the Bible. It's forgiveness through and through. Covenant after covenant, we just broke it. And Christ, of course, Son of God. Ty Gibson wrote a book on that, but he, and the emphasis is that reconciliation, right? That Christ gave us that medium to look at him. He's reconciling us throughout the history of the universe. He's just reconciling humanity with God. It's providing that medium of forgiveness, that avenue. And I think we are to do that work too. Of course, he is the Lord. He is God, and we are humans, but we can be used by him. Through his power, we can start being mediums of reconciliation, which kind of goes into something that you're doing right now. Tell us a little bit more about how are you in your church being a medium of reconciliation? You tapped in the beginning, but expand it right now.
Yeah. So I started a project in concert or in collaboration with my church. We saw a great need for this kind of work. Not necessarily in our congregation. Sure, there are individuals who need to go through that process in our congregation. As I said, it's kind of a larger congregation, which means that there are plenty of opportunities for offenses, right? More people, more opportunity to offend someone. But, just seeing it within families and the larger, the society at large, just saw a really big need for reconciliation. And I really do prefer the word reconciliation over the word forgiveness. I think that we kind of have some skewed pictures or ideas on what forgiveness means. It can kind of feel one-sided, but reconciliation really requires more than one person. It requires two people coming together.
So what you're saying is that you can forgive someone and that person cannot forgive you back.
Right.
But reconciliation is more of a joint project.
Right. Exactly. I could sit here, I could be in a room all by myself and say, you know what? Jose did me wrong, but I forgive him. And I'm really over it. I could probably kind of get over it and just say, you know what? It is what it is. I've thrown it into the sea of forgetfulness. I could be fine. But reconciliation does require for us to come together and to work through our relationship. And we see that as really important. And we see that as gospel work, and kingdom work. So started a project called No More Grudges, which is designed to facilitate reconciliation with the goal of accomplishing exactly that. There would be no more grudges. And our first project was with a father and son. The father and son, they did not have an extremely strained relationship. They weren't at each other's throats, They still loved each other. The father was still present in the home. But there was a period of time where there was just kind of some disconnect there, where things were not, where the father wasn't as emotionally present as the son needed him to be. And Ryan and Richard are the two people. And through working through their conversation, all of the reasons, what happened, getting on the same page about what exactly happened, let's make sure we're having the same conversation. Why did it happen? Well, now that gives Richard an opportunity as the father to kind of explain himself, like, hey, this is what I was going through, giving needed perspective to Ryan, the son, that he maybe never really considered. He just knew that, hey, I didn't feel like you were emotionally present there for me. What happened? Why did it happen? Father kind of explains himself. And where do we go from here? Now they're able to begin to talk about their aspirations, their goals, their dreams for their relationship. We want to be able to talk more and share and be vulnerable. And it was beautiful to see. I mean, the video, we put it out and the video received a really, really positive feedback. And it was amazing to me how many people would reach out to me, reached out to our page, would tag their father or their mother or their friend and like, hey, we should do this on the page. How many emails we got from people saying, yeah, I have a strained relationship with a cousin or with a friend and I want to do this, So seeing that was really encouraging and evidence to me that this is something that our society and our church and it's something that we need, something we really need.
I think something that I really think of when you were sharing that story is just the idea of dialogue. When you're able to dialogue with someone respectfully, this is what happened from my perspective. This is what happened from my perspective. This is why I was going through all of this. I was going through all of this as well. And it kind of opens you up to be more sensible to the other individual. I think that, and you cannot escape it. It's not something that you can just, because when you're face to face with that individual, it's not like you can create what we call the logical fallacy, a straw man, right? Like, you cannot create a straw man. You're seeing the person face to face when you're having this conversation, but there is this need for facilitation, this need for, and that kind of helps the process of forgiveness to be, and reconciliation to be more profound. It's not just like, oh, well, whatever, this happened, or, just let it go. It's more of like, let's dialogue, let's come into conversation, and how that can be applied to even the larger sphere. Not only within individual to individual, but historical events that have occurred, people groups, churches. I can think about an example of Christianity and certain matters that we did, when it comes to the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisition. You think about those things where people group against people group, where, or religious in this case, and of course we also have other conversations among our own humanity, like we kind of sanction it, quote unquote, at that time because of religion, but also how that makes us think more on the human side. It's not just a conversation of religion, race, or political party, or you don't like me on Facebook, but more like, let's talk, even though we differ on our ways that we approach it. But again, like the idea of where do we go from here? How do we get to that place, to the being positive contributors to society?
Right.
How to be positive contributors to our family, to our church.
Right.
I think those are very, very good points. So how long have you guys been doing this?
So we just started this summer, so only a few months. And something you said did trigger something for me. I do think that this process, the Matthew 5 or the Matthew 18 kind of conflict resolution, reconciliation process, I do think it's better suited for interpersonal conflict and interpersonal relationships than it is for institutional ills or institutional wrongs.
Okay.
And I do want to kind of put that out there because I think that, the Inquisition or the Crusades or maybe, racism in America, those things are just like blatantly wrong and so wrong that I think that people who are disinherited because of those institutions would almost take more offense at the idea of someone being able to explain them, if that makes sense.
Okay. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, like it's almost like, no, I don't want to hear your explanation. I don't want to hear you tell me like, oh, well, we were just, really just thinking that we were going to take this Christianity thing around the world. So we killed millions of, or like whatever it is, like I'm speaking hyperbolically, but you understand.
Yeah.
I think it could be.
I recant my position, adopt yours. I think, I understand what you're saying. I hadn't thought it from that perspective. And it makes sense because, well, this is a one-sided offense to a certain degree.
In a way it is.
Yeah. It wasn't just like, there was nothing that they could do. It was just like, and we talk about our current situation, when it comes to Syrian people,
exactly.
There's not much they can do.
Right.
There's a lot that we can do.
Right.
To reconcile, to right the wrongs that, we're doing as society. Just as a kind of like maybe intermission here, I just want us to think about that. The idea of like, there is a war happening right now in Syria. There's a war happening right now in Sudan, South Sudan, and like we're seeing the consequences before our eyes. But I think that because we have become desensitized, and I don't want to get political in this area, but I think it's also part of the work of reconciliation.
Yeah.
Brothers and sisters, countries, and like, that we need to ask the question of where do we go from here?
Right.
And maybe analyzing those things. But like you said, definitely when it comes to these wrongs, institutional wrongs, I adopt what you're saying, that this was a one-sided thing.
In many ways, yeah.
In many ways,
yeah.
And
I think you're absolutely right, and I appreciate you using your platform to bring awareness to what's happening in Sudan and in Syria and many parts of the world, but specifically those places. I'm impressed by that and thankful for that.
Yeah. Well, so you guys been doing this since the summer, right? And you guys got flooded, throughout, so you guys are shooting on a constant schedule. And
so we've been bringing people in to have the conversation. We are currently in production for this season, but also kind of thinking about how we could make this more effective. We came away from the first shoot thinking like, okay, this is good, but how can we take this to the next level? So we have some things in the works that I can't necessarily say right now.
Fine, no worries.
But I am really excited to be able to release some of the work that we've been doing and showing a little bit more about.
That's good. Yeah. I think as you emphasize, and I think this is something that we continue to emphasize, is dialogue. The dialogue that you're talking about works with reconciliation. As we start closing out, I think one of the big topics when we talk about forgiveness, when we talk about reconciliation, is the whole notion that you open with. Forgive and forget. Is that really possible? Or is there a better way? I don't want to say better, maybe. Is there a way that we can reframe that concept? Because it's so catchy, right? It's forgive and forget. Two F's, they go next to each other. Right. And it's just like, I was listening to The Daily the other day, and there was this lady that was just like talking about sexual assault. We know what's been happening in the sphere. And there's this lady that was, well, that happened so many years ago. Just, move on. I'm fine. That sexual assault happened to her. And she was just like, well, that happened to me. And I just forgot about it. I just continue with my life. How can we reframe ourselves to, well, understand that it is possible to a certain degree to forget. However, it doesn't happen for everyone. How can we maybe not get that catchy line and reframe it towards a different purpose?
Right. I do think you're hitting the nail on the head there, man. I think that forgive and forget is super catchy and it's probably going to be around for a while. And I think that the idea in and of itself is not inherently bad. There are situations where it is most healthy to forgive and to forget. I mean, I have a fiance who I love very much. We're not perfect people, so we do things that annoy each other or maybe even hurt each other. And what's best for us a lot of times on the silly things that one of us might do to the other is to forgive and forget. And I think any married person probably understands that if you kind of you hold on to things in your relationship for a long time, it's just going to ruin it. There are things that you're just going to have to say, hey, I'm going to forget this and move on. So there are healthy ways to apply that idea of forgive and forget. But again, this is kind of why I like to move the conversation on forgiveness to reconciliation, because reconciliation allows for us to have a conversation and for you to express to me, I've offended you. It allows you then to express to me what it would take for this to move forward in a healthy way. I think forgetting can often benefit the person who is maybe a habitual offender, right? Like, that's one of the situations I've kind of come in contact with, that there's a person who in the relationship is kind of constantly doing something that hurts the other party. And the idea of forgive and forget almost places this offended party, the person who's constantly being hurt, it places them in a rather vulnerable position where, like, I'm just supposed to forget this every time, and then boom, surprise, I've been hurt again. I'm not sure if that's what's best. I think reconciliation allows that person who's been hurt over and over and over again to look at the offender and say, hey, if you want to stay in relationship, in covenant together, this is what it's going to take. It's going to take, I know you're a Hebrew scholar. It's going to take some shuv, right? It's going to take some turning away from things and some repentance, and I think it's biblical. I think it's healthy. I think it's the way that we can restore healthy relationships. And again, I think it's kingdom work. And I think it carries not only from the individual relationship. I think this is one of those principles that should be applied to institutions as well, right? Instead of, we know that America has a certain history. Instead of us looking at those individuals who have been disenfranchised because of systems in our country, instead of looking at them and saying, hey, why don't you just forget it already? Why don't you just move on, right? I think it almost behooves us to say, well, let me look at the offending system and say, what are you going to do to deserve the trust and the loyalty of the people that you've offended time and time and time again? And of course, it works on a I guess what is that, more universal level with God, right? God goes out of his way to restore covenant with us, and he asks us to commit our lives to him and to walk according to his statutes and his will. And even though we mess up time and time again, I think that doesn't negate the fact, first of all, he forgives every single time, but it doesn't negate the fact that he's also asking us to come up higher and giving us as much help as possible to bring us to that level. So maybe a little bit of a long answer, but that's where I am on that. Yeah.
That's good. And yeah, I think I resonate with that. Again, the catchy phrase is a catchy phrase.
It's catchy.
And there's a reason why it's been around for such a long time. But I also think that we can reframe always and look for other ways to, hey, this may be applicable here, but we may need to do a little more, as you say, kingdom work in these areas. Well, Garrison, thank you very much.
Man, thanks for having me, man.
It's been great. It's been awesome. I think that hope our listeners have been enjoying this. A couple of last things before I give you the final word. If someone wants to be part of the project, is that still a possibility? I know you guys may hit being flooded, but how do they get in contact?
They can go to storiesbykindred.com. So that's STORIES by BY Kindred, KINDRED.com. storiesbykindred.com. And there's a form there to get involved with this No More Grudges project. So please go reach out. We'd love to start a dialogue with you and figure out how we can tell your story.
Yeah, and I think it'll be awesome if we can expand that to other churches. And they can adopt models. Sometimes local work, but more expansive is always
Absolutely. Maybe that's the next step, is to write a book or to write a blog post or something.
Help other people do it. In their own terms. Well, thanks a bunch, Garrison, again. And as we always do, we like to give the final word to our guests. So give us the final word on forgiveness.
Okay. Well, man, first I just want to say thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity to kind of talk to your audience. And I say with forgiveness, it is incredibly important work that we work through our issues with other people, that we go through the process of reconciliation. I cannot stress enough how important it is and how liberating and freeing it is. I believe that it is our work as Christians, and it is kingdom work. So that's what I want to highlight and encourage people to go out and do it. And be sure to just tell us. I mean, you don't have to be part of a project to do it. Just do it and tell us, and we'll celebrate with you.
That was our conversation about forgiveness with Garrison Hayes. Remember, if you want to participate in the project of No More Grudges, go to storiesbykindred.com. Again, storiesbykindred.com. Thank you for listening today. We appreciate that you have taken the time to listen to our podcast and ask that you share it with others. Please leave a review on iTunes or your favorite podcatching app. If you're enjoying our content, we want to invite you to consider contributing to our cause by becoming a patron, where you will receive exclusive content, have the ability to sit down with the Disruptive Adventism team, and ask relevant questions for Adventism and society. If you're interested in contributing, head to patreon.com/disruptiveadventism. Another avenue for contribution is to purchase our merchandise through Amazon or tpublic.com. You can find the links to our merchandise on our Facebook or Instagram pages. We also hope that our content has intrigued you a little bit, and that you decide to stay around for future podcasts. If you have any comments, feedback, or a topic you would like us to discuss, please go to our website at www.disruptiveadventism.org or shoot us an email to disruptiveadventism@gmail.com. We're eager to engage in discussions about any matter, so don't hesitate to contact us. This has been it for today. We hope you join us next time. And as always, we invite you to be disruptive.